Welcome back to Touchline Y254 here on the Touchline. We are discussing everything that has been happening in the world of sport. And this week, one of the things that happened was a betting poll platform that ran on a marketing and research company that did a poll here in Kenya concerning the 35% increase on the financial bill 2017. How do Kenyans react to such legislation? If a company is going to be taxed 35% of its profits, will they be able to work here in Kenya and offer youth many job opportunities? Joining us here in our second segment is Mr. Aggrey Wabulwenyi, General Manager, Frontier Sport and Entertainment. Karibu sana Mr. Aggrey.
Thank you.
The last time nilikuona ni mambo ya huko nje mpira, mambo ya FC.
Oh, jamani waingwe. So generally is a sports stakeholder. Of course, the touchline continues. Good afternoon and welcome back. If you're just tuning in, it's the show that keeps you posted with the latest in sports, both local and beyond, as Osoro read, but keep you posted earlier. Of course, gaming poll done on the taxation slam, 35% by the government on all betting firms, of course, involved in supporting and giving funding to football activities in the country. And they did a research and they came up with the findings with regards to what the public perception is about the legislation. Good to have you on board.
Thank you.
So, what are the findings?
Just thank you very much for hosting me here today. I would like to say that as Frontier Sport and Entertainment, we are a commercial, we commercialize sport in this country. So we represent Kenya Rugby Union, Football Kenya Federation, Kenyan Premier League, which has now been renamed SportPesa Premier League. We also have Athletics Kenya and Kenya Golf Union. So yes, indeed we are sports stakeholders in this country. And so in collaboration with a research firm called Tifa Research, we actually conducted an interview that covered, I think, 8 counties in total with 823 respondents. So we actually provided some of the research questions to enable the market, the research firm to conduct this interview. And what we found out was quite interesting, because over 60% of Kenyans do not actually support this legislation, which in essence they want to tax 35% of not profit but of sales. So for example, if you placed a bet of 100 shillings and you are 100 of you, the government will take 35% of that revenue without considering things like expenses, because any company has its own overheads, from salaries to marketing budgets to servers. Actually, people don't know that you need a serious server to run such kind of a betting business. And so in essence, probably the people who are legislating this may not have considered that such kind of taxation might actually make it unattainable for you to run such kind of a business. And remember, at the end of the year, again, you have to pay 30% on your profits. That is the normal statutory tax for that is the income tax after you have declared it your profit. So in essence, you're almost probably not in a wholesome figure, but almost 65% of a company's revenue.
Before we discuss in detail most of the findings of that report, I've got to ask a very basic question. Of the 8 counties you selected, why, I see Nairobi, Uasin Gishu, Meru, Nyeri, Kisumu, Mombasa, and Kakamega. Why those counties? Are those the counties where majorly we have got many young people in betting, or what came up with the selection of the counties?
When you're doing a research, you actually do a representative sample. But mainly some of these counties that you've mentioned, the statistics indicate that they generally tend to have a high turnover of betting than the rest of the counties.
Yes.
And just to be clear, when TIFA was doing this, of course they were doing other surveys. So we were just loading a question on top of the existing surveys that they were doing. Yeah, and yes, it's true that those 8 counties actually represent that the highest frequency of betting.
Yeah.
But in terms of the age, I don't think it's about the age, because even when I just pick one of the strange findings that we got,
Yes.
the people who are 50 years and above, 58% of them, actually, is it 58 or 68%? 68% of them actually do not support this legislation.
Yes.
Which is actually the highest, because the lowest in that graph was 56%, which is between 40 and 44 years old.
So your research was based on 8 counties alone, and you interviewed 823
Yes.
members of the public. Do you think probably the outcome of that particular research reflects the national outlook?
Yes, of course. That's why I'm saying that in research, a representative sample of the population actually tends to reflect what the general population thinks or feels.
Now, let's get into your research. You cannot get the graphs and everything. Now, give us, in summary, some of the major key findings that we don't, because most everybody is saying 60% of the Kenyans and all that, but what are the major key findings from your research that you found out from the Kenyans?
When they were asked who they think promote sport in this country the most, we actually found out that the top 3 brands or organizations or institutions that are seen to support sport, 2 of them are actually betting firms. At 82% is Sport Pesa. That's how they view it. At 35% is Safaricom, and 21% Betway. Of course, East African breweries come 4th at 20%, with FKF coming 4th at 19%. I think this is a very interesting one, because a few months ago FKF was not seen to be very serious with what they were doing, but now I think with the new administration it looks like something have happened there. Of course, 5th on that chart is the government of Kenya at 13%, and KCB Bank Group 10%, and to sum that top list is Britam at 2%.
Personally, do you absolutely agree with the findings of the gaming poll?
I think
from the personal level as a football stakeholder and sports factor in general.
Yes, this is what I would say. When sports betting, which was mobile-based, premiered in this country, I think 3 years ago, most of the sporting teams and organizations were actually suffering a lot. Remember that when I think SportPesa decided to finance or to sponsor the Kenyan Premier League, which is now SportPesa Premier League, most teams were actually unable to pay salaries to their players, and courtesy of their sponsorship, that one has been sorted. Of course, in the last 4 months, there has been a problem with SuperSport pulling out.
Yes.
But generally, I think they have done well. Now, remember they have sponsored Gor Mahia as well, AFC Leopards. I think lower tier league you have Nakuru All Stars and such kind of things. Also, you have Betika with Sofapaka, Elite Bet with the military, that is Ulinzi. So when you look around, probably 6 or so clubs in the league depend on the proceeds of the betting firms.
So in short, what you're trying to say is that betting firms have been actively involved in funding and supporting sporting activities in the country, and to some extent they have elevated sport in the country at local level, that is, to
Yeah.
another top level. Probably, do you think the findings of your own research will make the government rescind its decision to impose 35% taxation slump on betting firms?
To be honest, is sometimes difficult to reverse not a bill, but a law that has already been passed into law. And in essence, what the stakeholders agreed on that day is that they need to form a lobby group
Yes.
that will consist of the betting firms, sports federations that are beneficiaries of this betting firms proceeds, and probably tax experts and economists, so that they look at the impact that sports betting firms are having in the sports arena. Remember that before, for example, I'll use again SportPesa sponsored FKF. Our ladies team was sleeping in the
Starlets.
Yes, Harambee Starlets were actually sleeping in the changing rooms of Kasarani, and sometimes I think somewhere opposite City Stadium.
Yeah.
But right now you can see it's a professional outfit, and I think courtesy of that you have seen them qualify for the Africa Women Cup of Nations. And so I think when we look at it wholesomely, we need to appreciate what they have been doing in the local sport. Remember that courtesy of betting firms, we have had exchange programs here in Kenya, betting firms bringing in people like Arsenal trainers, Southampton trainers. Betway, I think, brought in some trainers from West Ham. And so I think the government probably needs to look at these betting firms as partners, not as probably institutions that are affecting morality. Remember, one of the key pillars of I think the Ministry of Sport,
Yes.
they were looking at having a national lottery whose proceeds they could invest in teams.
The lottery fund.
Yes, so that they take it to the National Sports Fund to do that. And remember, the government is saying that they want to take this 35% so that they finance the National Sports Fund, that can in turn support local sports. But we cannot really deduce evidence of the government having a track record of managing properly the funds around sport. So I don't think they inspire confidence to actually warrant them taking that. And personally, I will have looked at it from the point that why can't the government, in collaboration with the betting firm, sit down and agree on, let's say, sports infrastructural projects, for example, stadiums, grounds, let's say indoor arenas,
Yes.
that they can finance. Because any business, and anyone can tell you that, you want to be associated with something so that you gain mileage. For example, if Betway wants to be on the shirt of Mathare United, is because they want the fan base of Mathare United to associate the brand to their team, which drives sales.
One question I've got for you is the lobby group that, let's say, the sports stakeholders and the federations plus the betting companies are supposed to come up with to try and lobby the government against this law. What kind of changes would you like the lobby group to have, or something? Will you be coming with a paper that will say, this is what we do and this is what we want to do for you as for us as stakeholders in the sports industry? Or what kind of lobbying will that lobby group have?
I think, as I just said a few minutes ago, you need to look at it from the point of how do the government and the betting firms and the sporting organizations, from federations to teams to individual sportsmen and women, all benefit from this revenue that is being generated from betting farms. An individual sportsman or woman want to earn a living out of their talent. So if I am playing for, let's say, Mwamba RFC, I want to put food on the table. So if the betting farm is sponsoring my team, then my team in turn pays me. It tells you that the food chain is complete, and the government is achieving the objective of developing talent.
So last weekend we exclusively spoke to Football Kenya Federation President Nick Mwendo on this particular platform, and to some extent he agrees with you that that 5% taxation slam on betting farms will dent Kenyan sports a huge setback. And of course, remember the betting farms led by SportPesa, which is one of the probably most involved in funding sporting activities in the country, have already given a notice to the teams, clubs, and all the beneficiaries they offer their services to, that in January next year, if it stands as it is right now, that 5% taxation slam, then they will jack off.
Yeah.
What's the way forward like?
You see, in essence, what this law is doing is transferring the power of giving betting firms the free hand to choose where to invest the money, and transferring the same to the government, that is the National Sports Fund. Yeah. So as a, let's say, as a player, a sport betting player, let's say for example Elite Bet that has sponsored Ulinzi, if they are 35% of their sales is actually taxed, then at the end of the year 30% income tax on the profits is levied. It means that probably when they were doing the projection of sponsoring Ulinzi, they had not factored that into consideration. Yes. So it means, in essence, probably the government, the message is sending is, give us the money so that we can go and sponsor Ulinzi, which is a bit difficult because I have not seen a government that directly funds teams activities, unless actually it's national teams. Yes. So for example, I don't know how the government, if let's say SportPesa, for example, pulls out of Gor Mahia, AFC Leopards, any other team, and let's say out of Kenya Rugby Union, does the government guarantee that it can actually go and match the same amount of money back to Gor Mahia so that they keep performing at the same level?
A very interesting point you're coming out with. And then one of the things that the government came up with when they were writing this law was that they want to make the youth get off free money. They go and work hard and get their hard-earned money. And I want to understand this from your research findings. Did you find some place where the youth were saying, even if you even if you say you are taking 35% out of these people, will it stop the youth from going to betting and say, hey, this is not a good vice for us?
I think probably this is an industry that is misunderstood. There's no empirical evidence to show that when someone is betting, they actually are committing a vice.
Yes.
It is actually a form of entertainment. So as you're watching the game, and I'm watching, probably we are planning to watch, let's say tomorrow, the FA Community Shield between Arsenal and Chelsea. Yes. And I decide to say, I think this team will win, and I place an odd on it. I don't think it is driving any form of vice. Just like any other industry, I think it's a form of entertainment, and as I told you, you can see that the people who are over 50 years old are actually the highest in terms of people who do not want this law to.
You're trying to be cautious and associating betting as something to do with vice, but you know vice is also orchestrated in some ways through addiction.
Yes.
Someone getting addicted to betting, you know, paying priorities, paying much attention to betting throughout.
Yeah. So, as I said, I think the research also there's a finding that quite a high number of guys, I think 62% of the people who are sampled say they know someone who have earned a sizable amount of money out of this, and so actually people are making a living out of it. So I don't think it is a vice as you are putting it, and you can see he categorically talked about the youth, yet
Yes.
the spread of the curve
Yeah.
is actually almost the same. Over 50% across from 18 to over 50.
Yeah.
Over 50% are actually betting. So I don't think it is something that is unique to the youth.
It's a quality conversation you'll never want to miss on the touchline Y254 every Saturday 12 to 2, talking about sports in several disciplines, of course, and focusing on not only Kenya but also on both continental and international fronts. And this particular afternoon we're just discussing on matters sports, gaming and taxation act. Remember that 5% taxation slam by the government on betting firms involved in funding and supporting sporting activities in the country. And they did a research as Aggrey, Wabulwenyi, General Manager of Frontier Sports Entertainment. They did a research and came up with the findings, of course, interviewing 823 members of the public in 8 counties in Kenya, and came up with the findings, of course, saying that 60% of Kenyans don't agree with that particular legislation. It's been a pleasure having you on board. Probably we shall be looking forward to host you next time for further discussion on the same, so that we dissect about the entire issue and bring on board several stakeholders, betting firm top honchos, alongside government representatives to see what can be the way forward with regards to the matter. But before we do that, your parting shot?
Once again, thank you for hosting me here, and
Before we let you go,
yes,
you talked about commercialization of sports. That's what your company does.
yes.
When you heard Neymar is leaving Barcelona to PSG for 222 million euros,
Yes.
what came up into your mind from a financial perspective in sports?
Yeah, it just shows you that sport is no longer a pastime activity. Is actually going to take a seat on the boardroom table about making financial decisions. And for a very long time, it has been Barcelona that has been flexing muscles. Remember Barcelona and actually Real Madrid. Remember when Ronaldo was poached from Man U, I think it was 80 million. Then it was a world record. But when Gareth Bale again moved over, he broke the same record. I think years back when the senior Ronaldo was hired by Real Madrid,
Yes.
I think it was 18 million pounds then, which was ridiculous. But now you can see 222, and I think sport is going to play a critical role in the economics of different sectors across the world, and even locally here, you can see teams now willing to pay upwards of 4 million shillings to acquire talent. So when I try to tie this conversation with betting, as the betting firms are making money and plowing it back to the different sporting organizations, it means that the parents who are developing the talents of their kids know that in future you have probably going to create someone who is viable economically and supporting the members of the community. An example, Victor Wanyama. I know all of you know how much he earns
Yes.
per week, and I don't see whether there's any profession in Kenya that pays a similar amount of money.
It's just the same thing I've been telling him
Yes.
regularly, that come off this cocoon of being in the comfort zone of not associating yourself with any game. But at least he's improving nowadays. He's actively involved in matters. Scrabble, it's the touchline on Y25. We're taking a commercial break, but up next, Vladimir Klitschko. After a long-standing service of over 20 years in matters boxing, he decided to retire from professional boxing, and remember, he was set to fight Anthony Joshua in a few months from now as we speak, but probably Tyson Fury defeat might have also immensely contributed in his retirement. It's the touchline on Y254 for Maxwell Wasika and Robert Osoro. Stay tuned and keep enjoying the program.